In Chapter 3, we begin to analyze markets using supply and demand analysis. So there we go. We're going through Chapter 3. What we're going to start with is we'll start with demand, and then we'll go through supply, and then we'll start to look at how changes, how each of them change. We'll talk about the ideas of consumer and producer surplus. We'll also talk about elasticity, and then we'll wrap up with kind of a discussion about prices and the functionality of markets and why they tend to work fairly well. Okay. All right. Now it's important to keep in mind as we go through these graphs that we're not trying to be overly mathy and we're not trying to lose sight of what's important with these graphs because they're meant to be very simple. Okay. When we talk about a market and we talk about using supply and demand to analyze a market, all we're talking about is analyzing the behavior of buyers and sellers as they interact in a market. Okay. So we'll talk about this on the next slide, but our terms supply and demand are basically referring to two different groups of people. Supply, that's the sellers. Demand, that's the buyers, right? So it's a simple graph to describe the behavior of people, right? And so it's important not to get caught up in the math and the graph. Just remember, it's a simple representation of the way people behave when they're interacting in a market. All right, so as I mentioned before, when we say demand, what we really mean is, well, that's buyers. And so we say if demand is going to change, what we mean is, oh, the behavior of buyers changes. Okay. And when we talk about supply, that's just sellers. Okay. So that's all a market is. Buyers, sellers, interacting, exchanging, buying and selling things. Okay. Okay. Now, there are few things in economics that are really predictable. Right? And the reason why is because we're studying people. And people are not very predictable, right? In physics and chemistry, you get a lot of predictability in nature, right? You have laws, you have Newton's laws, you have electromagnetic laws. There's lots of things that are predictable, right? And that's to use the scientific method to discover and learn about those things, right? But economics, we're studying people, right? And people are not very predictable. Sometimes irrational, sometimes emotional, sometimes sometimes lots of different things, right? And so there are a few things that are predictable. One of those things is demand, okay? And again, same thing when we get to supply. That is the behavior of buyers when they're in a market and they're seeing changes in price, okay? That's the part that's pretty predictable. So we call it the law of demand. And it's not meant to be complex. It's pretty simple. It basically is a statement that tells you something you already know, right? So the textbook statement that we have here is that the law of demand says that other things equal, right, assuming nothing else changes, the quantity demanded of a good falls when the price of a good rises. So let's kind of say this in slightly more, understandable terms. Basically means for buyers, when you go into a store, if that price is higher, you're probably not going to buy as much, right? You're going to see that high price and go, wait a second, I'll go buy something else, right? Or on the other hand, if you go into the store and the price is lower, you say, oh, that's great, I'll get a little more, right? If it's buy one, get one free, right? That's all the law of demand says, okay? So what it means is that if the price goes up, quantity we buy goes down. And it also means if the price goes down, then the quantity we buy goes up. Okay. So obviously, that's not an earth-shattering law, but again, we're studying people. Not a lot of things are predictable. Okay. Now, a lot of times when we're discussing these things, we're going to talk about quantity demanded, That just basically means the amount buyers want to buy at a particular price. So the kind of official definition I've got here is it's the amount of a good that buyers are willing and able to purchase at a price. Okay. So quantity demanded is a specific quantity. Now a lot of times we abbreviate this with a big capital Q and a little subscript D, okay, for quantity demanded. Okay. So quantity demanded is just an amount buyers want to buy and do buy at a particular price. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this definition and we're going to start to move towards a graph. Okay, and the first step is we need some data. Okay, so that's what we'll take a look at on the next slide. All right. Now, before I jump to the next slide, I like to use spam in my examples. And so you can try to do a little trivia with yourself. I don't know, maybe you could try to guess, or don't look it up online, but I use spam. And so there's one state of the 50 United States that really loves spam and consumes a lot of it. So I'll give you a second to try to see if you can figure out which state consumes half of all spam that's consumed in the United States. All right, see if you can figure it out. I'm moving on to the next slide. If you guessed Hawaii, you are right. Hawaiians love spam. So we're talking about demand for spam. And I mentioned that we're going to talk about the law of demand and we're going to introduce some data. So what I've got here is some made up data where I've got prices of spam in the first column here and the quantity of spam that buyers in Hawaii want to buy in the second column there. Okay. Now, this is what's called the demand schedule. It's basically just a table with price and quantity. Okay. But this data in this table is saying the exact same thing as the law of demand. The law of demand says that when the price goes up, the quantity that people want to buy goes down. And that's what we see. As the price goes up, that is, as we move down this table to higher prices, what happens to the quantity of spam that Hawaiians want to buy? It also falls, right? So price goes up, the quantity that people want to buy falls, okay? So this data matches basically the law of demand, all right? So now we're going to take this data and we're going to graph it. And the graph is going to be what we call the demand curve, right? So what's a demand curve? It's just a graph of the relationship between price and quantity demanded. That is, it's a line that's supposed to represent how buyers behave, right? So it's not like we're trying to make something overly mathy, right? We're just saying, hey, the way buyers behave in a store can be easily captured in this one little graph, in this one little line, right? And that's really helpful, okay? So the demand curve is just simply a graph of the relationship between price and quantity demanded, right? Two variables, it's going to be our old XY coordinates that we used back in our math classes, and we're just going to graph a simple little line, okay? All right, now when we construct these graphs, there's a couple things that we always do, okay? First, on the vertical axis here, which is traditionally our y-axis, we always put price. Now on your graphs, you can just put a big capital P for price. And on the horizontal axis over here, we always put Q for quantity, okay? So price is always on the vertical axis, quantity is always on the horizontal axis, okay? Always, always, always. Don't mix that up. You will make me either sad or angry if you mix that up, okay? All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph the data that we had 2 slides ago, and I've got it right here, so it makes it easy to see it. I'm going to graph each of these points. Now, I've already graphed 2 of the points. It's basically 2 endpoints. But let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to change to black. Let's go price of $1. The quantity demanded of spam would be 10 million. Okay. So let's go over here, $1. And I'm going to put a dot right here at 10 million. I'm going to go to the next point, $2 and 8 million. So put my ruler here. 8 million right here. Okay, that's $2, 8 million. Next up, $3 and 6 million. Okay, $3, 6 million right there. 4 and 4 million. Let's go ahead and put that one in. 4 and 4 million. There we go. And $5 and 2 million cans. So let's put at this point, should be about right there. And of course, our last point I've already put in here, which is $6. The Hawaiians say, heck no, that is just way too much for Spam. We are not buying it. Okay. All right, so now I've got all my points in here. And I'm going to switch to blue. And I'm going to draw a line in on these points. Okay, I'm basically going to put in a line as best I can. Looks like I was a little off when I was drawing my demand curve here. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, my black points were, I should maybe use graph paper next time. But there we go. I'll just make them a little bigger to make it look like I was right on. Okay. Okay. This line, this graph right here, is what we call a demand curve. So we label it with a big capital D. Okay. So what does this line represent? It represents buyers and the way they behave, right? So here's what I mean by this. Think of this area of the demand curve up here. Okay. Well, up here we have higher prices, higher price, and it corresponds with a lower quantity, right? Up here we've got low Q and high P, lower quantity. And that makes sense, right? So when buyers go into a store and the price of something has gone up, they tend to buy less. So higher price, lower quantity, okay? And let's think about down here. Down here we've got lower price. And how do buyers behave when there's a low price? Well, they tend to buy more, right? And sure enough, this is also higher quantity. Okay. Now, I'm going to go to the next slide because I have a little more space. Now, the next slide is just kind of a nice computer-drawn version of this. So let me go ahead and label this. And I'm going to draw something in that I don't want you to draw. I'm just going to draw something in and ask a hypothetical question. All right. Why is my demand curve sloped down? Right? I drew the previous slide and this slide. My blue demand curve here is a downward sloping graph. Okay. Now I've got a green graph right here. Why not an upward line? Okay. Well, if you think about it a little bit, you might start to say, well, an upward sloping line wouldn't make sense because an upward sloping line indicates there's a positive relationship between price and quantity for buyers. That is, as the price goes up, buyers want to buy more. But that doesn't make any sense, right? We know buyers only want to buy more if the price goes down, right? So an upward sloping line doesn't make sense and doesn't fit for demand, that is buyers, because it doesn't express how they behave. An upward sloping line means that buyers buy more when the price is higher and they buy less when the price is lower. And that's not how buyers behave, right? So that's why that line is wrong. It should not slope upward. Demand curve should always slope downward. Always slope down. Okay?